way I got it figured is a play on words for action figure content, but I got a lot of things figured. Sometimes those things are directly related to a physical toy. Sometimes it's the idea of a toy. Sometimes it's just an idea. This time, the idea of a toy that's been running the internet for the past month or so is going to be the subject of this video. I'm talking about everybody's favorite Studio Series 86 Leader Class Megatron. I've seen a lot of Studio Series 86 Megatron content. It's really been dominating the news for the last few weeks, month, maybe. Everybody's got opinions, lots of opinions flying around. There's a lot to unpack. What he is, what he isn't, what he should be, what he shouldn't be, what he should be called. I disagree with really a lot of it, maybe even most of it. This video is to put my thoughts down on record about this pivotal figure that we probably won't even have in our hands until around Christmas. It's June. So as you all know, Studio Series 86 Megatron is Hasbro's take on a mainline screen accurate robot mode for their #1 bad guy, Megatron. He's easily the most anticipated figure of the year, and that's in a year where we have tons and tons of anticipated figures. Nexus Prime, Megatronus, super anticipated. Superion, super anticipated. None of them hold a candle to Studio Series 86 Megatron. I don't even think it's a debate. The look, the posability, all of that is more or less on point, with an imperfection or an inaccuracy here or there for the robot mode. It's generally the alternate mode that everybody's up in arms about, has the problems, issues, whatever. What it is, what it's not, it's, again, easily the most anticipated figure of the year. So background. I know I give this stuff out in bits and pieces in my regular review videos, but just a little short snippet biography. I'm at the time of shooting this video 51 years old. I've been a massive Transformers fan for all that 51 years, the entire 51 years. My tastes skew way in the direction of G1. The comic book, the toy, the cartoon. That's not to say I don't love other aspects of Transformers, but G1 being where I came from, it's #1. I have scores and scores of videos attesting to my devotion to Transformers, G1 in particular, other stuff as well. This channel covers action figures in general, but I've always stood 10 toes down that this is the Transformers first channel. It's only appropriate considering of my favorite things, Transformers sits firmly at the top, knocking G.I. Joe and Star Wars off of their quite lofty pedestals back in the 1980s. That doesn't even account for Marvel and DC, doesn't account for Street Fighter, doesn't account for all the other things I love, all the other things we love. Pretty much have some affinity for all those things. But Transformers is the top of the heap. Always has been, always will be. Once you get into the book of me and Transformers, you don't even get off the first page without encountering the Decepticon leader, Megatron. He is, and always has been, one of my absolute favorites. I particularly love the cartoon version from season 1, maybe not so much season 2. But in season 1, he had a cold, calculated, but still emotional evil. And I've always loved that interpretation. And of course, the bio that came on the back of his box that painted him as the ultimate foil to Optimus Prime, who was my childhood favorite, still resonates with me to this day. And hey, 41 years later, I know I'm nowhere near the only fan. We live in a world where people call the theme song to Transformers Autobot propaganda, a subject I may tackle in a future editorial. All that to say, I'm really vested in this figure. Can't wait to get it. And I want to do the issues justice from my personal perspective. Since this channel is my personal bully pulpit, I'm going to use it. Let's start with the biggest issue I've seen raised. The fact that this figure turns into a tank rather than a gun. Although Megatron didn't just transform into any old gun, he transformed into a Walther P-38 pistol, modeled after the one seen on The Man from U.N.C.L.E. in the 1960s. I recently came across a video where the creator, whom I greatly respect, posted the laws about replica guns in the video to refute the idea that Hasbro simply couldn't engineer this figure into a gun. And while some of what he said was correct, it didn't encapsulate the entire kind of complex issue getting exactly what you think you want entails. The reason why, quote unquote, it can't be made into a gun is part law and part business. The business part, which may be the biggest part, is basically you can't be selling realistic or realistic looking toy guns in the general toy aisle these days. There's no law against it, but you have parent groups and the like that frown upon these things. And these things bring unwanted attention to the toy business. I've certainly seen my fair share of that going back to the 1980s, including with Megatron himself. Megatron is the reason the law was made in the first place. Most people don't seem to know or remember. It's definitely something that seems like it's going to be more trouble to Hasbro than it's worth to put a toy like that on the shelves. So they're not going to do it. Even if there aren't laws that are preventing it from happening, it's not something that's going to be very popular with them. That, though, doesn't even get close to the idea of it being a realistic replica of a Walther P-38 pistol, an entire other stack of Energon cubes. The G1 version of Megatron and the subsequent Masterpiece figures all turn into a Walther P-38 pistol. This is problematic in and of itself. Why? Because the Walther P-38 is a trademarked firearm owned by Walther. Back in the 1980s, the Microman toy that would originally become Megatron was made by Takara, a Japanese company. Japan has always been, let's say, different when it comes to copyright and trademark laws. Basically, they don't care. They only care if they're made to care. So when you say, but they made Masterpiece in Japan, you should know contextually, they basically don't give a scrap. They don't care. Unless somebody comes along and makes them care. When somebody makes them care, if they want to make the thing, they'll pay the license. It's really that simple. To illustrate, you can look at the MP36 box itself. Megatron turns into the classic Walther P-38 pistol with all the attachments and everything that it always had on the G1 toy, which is the same toy that models the Walther P-38 from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. But there's no licensing from the Walther Corporation, Walther Incorporated, whatever the name of the company for Walther is. It's not a licensed Walther P-38, even if it's a downright practical duplicate of a Walther P-38. On the other hand, if you look at MP-21 Bumble, MP-45 Bumble, otherwise known as Bumblebee, both of those figures are licensed Volkswagen toys. They're licensed by Volkswagen. Why is that? Because Volkswagen is a company notorious for enforcing its trademarks. If you want to use Volkswagen, you got to pay them, or you ain't doing it. Doesn't matter whether you're Japan, America, wherever. It ain't going to happen. Every Bumblebee we've gotten in America or otherwise has Volkswagen officially licensed product on the box, including the Studio Series 86 one. For that same reason, we don't have a Masterpiece Jazz. Never happened. Why? Because Porsche will not allow the use of the Martini Porsche, the iconic Porsche that Jazz turns into, to be an officially licensed product to make for a robot toy warrior. They don't want their license to be used for that. Ironically, Porsche is owned by Volkswagen. However, the companies are owned by like two brothers. So while Porsche is a subsidiary of Volkswagen, one controls the licensing for Volkswagen, but not the licensing for Porsche. And the one that controls the licensing for Porsche ain't letting the car make a Jazz out of it. Gets crazy. So while we don't have any real way of knowing whether or not Walther objects to making replica adult toys of their guns, which is yet another distinction. Masterpiece Megatron is an adult toy. It's not a toy for kids. There's never been anything reported about it. And since Hasbro will make commemorative versions of G1 Megatron and Masterpiece Megatrons out the yang, seems like Walther don't really care that much. But that's in Japan. If it was in America, most likely we'd be paying for that license, and it might even translate into the price of the figure. Another point about Transformers in general is that it is a jointly owned license. I don't want to call it a license. It's a jointly owned brand by Hasbro and Takara. They both own it, which is why Takara can make Transformers that are straight up Transformers, but we don't even get them over here in America. Maybe Hasbro will bring some over, like the Missing Link line, stuff like that. But Hasbro doesn't necessarily bring everything that Takara makes over here to Transformers. They make stuff over there that we never even see or sniff, because they also own it. So they can make Megatron to their heart's content, but doesn't mean Hasbro can. Even if you were to get a Megatron from Hasbro, if it was to happen in some magical universe, he'd likely have to have an orange plug to be sold on a toy shelf in America. So it would suck anyway. Yes, people have Masterpiece Megatrons with no orange plug to get it through customs. Some people had the orange plug that was glued on. Some people had an orange plug that just stuck in the barrel that you could take it out. Some people got a Masterpiece Megatron that didn't even have an orange plug. I'm one of those people. Mine didn't have an orange plug. Doesn't have an orange plug. Never had an orange plug. But that was a precaution to make sure the toy got through customs, because there was a real question of whether or not it would even get through customs. Megatron isn't even the only thing that had that problem. Masterpiece Exhaust, the Marlboro version of Wheeljack, also had that issue. So that's really the basic explanation of why you ain't getting a Masterpiece Megatron gun in America or a Studio Series 86 Megatron gun in America. That's the basics of it. There's probably really even more to it than that. But that's really what it comes down to. Unfortunately, you're going to have to check your entitlement at the door, like I did, like I do on a lot of things. I've been collecting Transformers a long time. I actually think it's more instructive to find out why things are than to sit around and complain about them and just be entitled and think that it just should be the way you want it to be just because that's the way you want it. It's not. Nothing works that way. So we ain't getting a gun. Personally, I'm okay with it. Now I'm going to go on record and say it. I obviously would prefer a Walther P-38 version of Megatron. I would prefer it. But I live in the real world, and I know you can't always get what you want. And it's not just because they just don't want to give it to you. There's like reasons. I have MP36, as I already mentioned, and I don't turn that into a gun, and it turns into a gun. Why? Because it's a very painful transformation. I don't want to do that. The gun mode ultimately isn't for you anyway. It's really to put in the hand of a character, Starscream, Megatron, Soundwave, every once in a while, Optimus Prime. And Hasbro and Takara were wise enough to give you a little tiny Megatron gun mode with a 5mm peg so you can put it in Starscream's hand. So you can act out all your scenes from Transformers the movie or the cartoon or stuff you're making up on your own. That's why it's there. Personally, I'm never transforming mine into a tank. I might not even transform it into a tank for the review when I get the figure. I may, but I may not. Because I'm buying it for the robot mode. Whether you want to believe it or not, any Transformer you buy, you're buying for the robot mode. It's a robot that turns into something. It's not something that turns into a robot. It's the robot mode. That's what they care about. And in a very weird few times where they concentrate on the other mode is so that some function can be achieved. Function being achieved, example, Ultra Magnus. They did the Studio Series 86 Ultra Magnus. The robot is massively large. Why? Because the fandom insists that Ultra Magnus be able to carry 4 Autobots on his back. Well, you're not going to get the proper sized Ultra Magnus in robot mode if he's got to carry 4 Autobots on his back. That's why I always call Ultra Magnus the hardest working toy in Transformers, because he's always had to be all things to everybody. And when he doesn't, it's always a problem. If he doesn't come with the white robot, it's an issue. If he can't carry 4 characters on his back, it's an issue. If he's too big, for some, it's an issue. So to give you that gun, they had to cut a corner. You get the sword that he fought Optimus Prime with and slashed them with, but you don't get the purple gun that he ends up ultimately shooting Optimus Prime down with in the fight, because it's a Leader Class toy. You can't have everything. But they gave you the little Megatron gun, which if I'm going to pick one of the over the other, I'm going to pick that. But I do want that gun. Probably going to have to rely on 3P for that. Or just keep playing around with the one that I have with my Masterpiece Megatron. The other thing I keep seeing is that Hasbro doesn't have the right to call this Studio Series 86, or that it's false advertising to call it Studio Series 86, because he didn't turn into a tank. He turned into a gun. As I often say off camera for a lot of things, oh well, LOL. It's Hasbro's IP. It's their toy. They can call it whatever they want. They say it's Studio Series 86 Megatron. It is. Studio Series 86 Megatron is screen accuracy, yes, but mainly for the robot. You could argue it's not screen accurate with Ultra Magnus. He's like massive. He's not that big in the movie. Nobody's crying about that. So, what are we doing? Sometimes these complaints all just come down to entitlement if you just want it to be the way you want it to be. I get it. As I said earlier, I'd rather he was a gun. I'd rather Megatron turned into a Walther P-38. But for various compounding reasons, it can't happen. It's not going to happen. So you might as well live in the world that is rather than the world that you want it to be. At least that's my mentality. I know somebody will say, well, why don't you just get a non-transforming version or get a statue if that's what you want? And my answer to that is, I buy what I like. I want my Transformers to transform, even if I don't transform them. But I do buy those other things. I have plenty of non-transforming Megatrons. I probably have more non-transforming Megatrons than any other character. But I still want one that transforms. I want things that are like to go with like. You want you want a Megatron that's going to go with your Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime that you spent $90 on? Well, this is that Megatron. New Age ain't going to cut it. He's fine for Earthrise Optimus, but he ain't going to cut it up against Studio Series 86 that I already spent $90. So there you go. Bottom line, these kind of entitled complaints are more about your preference and are essentially nitpicks that don't really get at the real substance of the issue, if there really even is an issue. And I'm not saying this to diss anybody. Don't feel dissed. All I'm trying to do is put some perspective into this whole thing. Perspective that the internet ain't gonna ever give you, because people just type whatever. It's easier to type how much you hate something in a few words than actually espouse and explain why. People don't like to explain things. Anyway, I'm going to sum this up. Studio Series 86 is fine as a tank, fine in Studio Series 86, fine at Leader Class, and will be fine on both my shelf and my son's shelf coming around Christmas. My expectations have been met. Expectations tempered with finding out the whys and wherefores of things. I love finding out those whys and wherefores for all things that I love. Why this is. How come it's like this? So that I can have an informed opinion. All the stuff that I talk to you guys about on my channel when it comes to action figures are from informed opinions. It's from going out and finding out why this is, or being there at the time of the issue at hand. And, you know, we dealt with this with Masterpiece Megatron. It was a big thing. This is sort of that in the inverse, but it happened. So one thing I want to do real quick is I showed a lot of pictures. These are not my pictures. I got them mostly courtesy of TFW2005.com and various Facebook groups. I don't own any of these pictures. I'm not taking credit for them. I'm only using them for illustration. Thanks to all who posted them. So this is a first on this channel, the editorial, but it won't be the last. I think there's probably going to be at least one editorial a month on this page. So if you're into opinion pieces where the opinion will always at least have some basis in something beyond I hate this, I love this, then tune in. If not, go in peace. Oh, by the way, I want all the smoke. I'll never edit or remove a comment that's reasonable, and I will never block you due to a comment I don't like. I just think that's just weak. And by reasonable, I mean a comment that I will let my kids read. So you can say whatever you want, but when you write it, if you think a kid could read it and not be unduly damaged, then it's fair game. If not, I'll let you know. I'm taking this down because I don't want my kids to read it. Other than that, have at it. Let me have it with both barrels. I can take it. I've likely been at this longer than you, and I'll likely be still at it after you're done. So it's whatever. I'm tougher than Ironhide when it comes to this stuff. So that's going to do it for this one. Till next time, everybody stay safe, happy collected, and as always, see you on the next video. Peace.
The way I got it figured.